we'll get right into it then. How about it?
Wait, you're not going to introduce us?
Yeah, I was going to say,
No,
where's
we're
the
just
intro?
jumping straight into the subject.
Wait.
No, I'm
what?
kidding. I like your vest, Rachel.
Thank you. I think Nai made it. It has a
Oh.
lot of holes
She
in
made it?
Wow.
Dang, I think the camera's too far for people to see, but that's
Let me just...
some level of
Just jump down there and show
There's
the...
some
crocheting.
nice... yeah, there's a lot of holes in it. I've been, like, patching them up. There were a lot in the back.
Oh,
but-
you keep this. You
What?
wear, like, you bring it with you?
that was my intention. So I had it with me last semester, but I never...
Cool, thank you both for joining me today. I know Rachel is a little stressed right now because she's baking for Thanksgiving tonight. So happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Rooftop Pod. Today I am joined here by my sister,
Rachel.
my brother,
Andrew.
and my name is Jesse. And today we're going to be talking about religion. Just a little bit of background. We were all raised in a Christian home. So we all grew up going to church basically every Sunday. And then on top of that, we also went to church on Fridays, sometimes Wednesdays,
Yep.
sometimes Mondays, holidays, you
Saturdays,
name it.
Thursdays.
We basically,
Tuesdays.
we lived at the church. No, so church was a really...
Sometimes we did live at the church.
Sometimes we did. These are good points.
Yeah, so the church was a really integral part of our growing up, and I kind of wanted to dissect kind of our journey through religion, especially since all three of us are kind of in different places now with religion, and even though it's played a big part in our life now, I would say our relationship with religion has changed quite significantly through the years. So yeah, I wanted to get into each of your own perspectives about religion, and then I'll talk a little bit about mine and kind of where you see or how you see religion playing a role in your life moving forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then we'll first start with a little bit of the background of how religion is a part of our life, because obviously our parents are immigrants. They weren't born into a Christian family. They came to America and found religion and found Christianity here. And I think the beginnings of how religion entered our family is pretty interesting.
Well, actually, no. Dad found religion in China.
Yeah,
Like,
so
he was
introduced to the idea
yeah.
of Christianity in China, but I wouldn't say he became a follower or
Christian, yeah.
became a Christian until he came to the U.S. And I think there's kind of a reason for that.
Oh, yeah,
So-
definitely.
Yeah, so to get into that a little bit, Dad moved to China in 94 or moved to
Moved to
U.S.
America.
Sorry, moved to the U.S. from China in 94. He came here for a math PhD, and almost immediately upon coming to the U.S., he was introduced to a Chinese family from the Cincinnati Chinese Church. And the family that introduced him to the church, they were very kind, and they offered him something that I don't think he could have found on his own, and that was a community of other Chinese immigrants that came to the U.S. with him. And Dad had already, like you said, been introduced to the idea of Christianity before while he was in China. And back then he kind of shunned it and didn't believe that it was for him.
So how Dad explained it to me was, so Dad was a big literature buff. Like, he really loved reading. He liked reading the classics, so like Shakespeare, all that. That's why, like, in our basement we have a little library that my dad kind of built, and all of it has like classics that he's read. To him, the Bible was just another piece of literature, because there's a lot of biblical references and a lot of like very famous like works of literature. So
Yeah.
he was like, oh, I'll read it for that context. And that's how he saw it as until he found the church, I think.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like a religion to him, it was just literature.
Because he was planning on moving to the U.S. Christianity to him back then was a way for him to learn about Western civilization. So he read the Bible, he understood it, and was like, oh, this is quite interesting, but he didn't actually feel like he wanted to join the church or become part of the community. Because that community is kind of non-existent in China.
I think also, like, it was a piece of fiction. Like, it wasn't a
He read it as
historical
like a
document.
storybook.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's I feel like even us growing up reading the Bible was
Just like bedtime stories.
Yeah, it was like a pretty fascinating storybook, because a lot of the stories there are very fantastical, and although all the reasons the stories were in there were to teach some sort of moral lesson, as a kid you kind of take it as a story rather than as something that you truly believe occurred. on this earth.
Really? I thought as a kid all these things truly occurred
Oh,
on Earth.
I think I was always kind of skeptical
Oh,
think
wow.
about
I
the
was
reality
too.
of this, and that's kind of what I struggled with a lot growing up, was the skepticism of how can I align all these stories in the Bible with what I learned in school between science and like history and like dinosaurs and fossils. Like, where does everything fit in
Yeah.
to the order of events?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I struggled
Wait, when
with.
did you have this thought? I'm trying to
I-
see if my brain developed at the same
It was
pace as
kind of
yours.
like a persistent thought, I think.
Yeah,
think because
same
here.
as soon as I learned about dinosaurs, I was like, "There's no dinosaurs in
As
the
soon as
Bible."
the Bible,
yeah,
yeah,
like
yeah.
Oh,
how does
that's
this fit
crazy.
into the whole biblical
Yeah.
like progression of things?
I remember first or second grade, one of those two, early elementary school, somebody in art class, we were just talking about religion
Uh-huh.
and the story of the creation of the earth came up in conversation somehow, I don't know. And I think that's when I was first introduced to the idea of evolution. But being brought up in a very Christian household,
Yes.
I was debating with her. I'm just like,
Taught to shun it, yeah.
what is this evolution that you speak
Yeah.
of? I'm like,
Crazy talk.
What is
Adam and
this?
Eve were the first two humans created.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
distinctly remember, first, second grade, coming home, telling this to mom and dad, and I was just like, oh, this person introduced me to
This
this
person
idea.
believes in evolution. How stupid.
evolution?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Young.
I had a lot of those kind of debates in college because I
Oh,
remained a
yeah.
Christian through sophomore year of college, or I stayed religious and stayed involved in the community until sophomore year of college. And I had a lot of these debates with my non-Christian roommates. In
Right.
fact, those were very difficult conversations because I had to come to face with a lot of the skepticism that I had myself.
Right.
Right.
And that kind of forced me to reevaluate what I really believed in and what the church really provided for me. And I want to take this back to our parents again,
Parents, right.
because what did religion provide for our parents when they first came
Right.
to the U.S.?
So much.
So much.
So much. Like, they 100% would not be the parents that they are today. Like, genuinely, like, I don't even know if they would be together. If it weren't for Christianity, they
That's
100%
facts.
would not be like the loving, caring parents that they are today. Like, we've talked about how dad had severe anger issues early on in the U.S. And I think like religion has played such a big part in him mellowing out and like adopting different styles of parenting. And just like in terms of being parenting, they really try to reflect, you know, what's taught in the Bible in terms of reflecting God's love and
Yeah.
like treating everything as a gift. Like,
Yeah.
the last three of us not planned, right? They call us God's gifts, which is
You
a
were.
lovely way.
You were planned.
I was not planned.
Mom wanted a girl.
No, she didn't. It was just you two. You two are the only ones that were planned.
Oh,
'Cause
okay. I
I've
didn't
grown
know
up
that.
with the
I didn't
notion.
know that.
Really? I've been
I don't
growing
know.
up saying.
I thought you were planned.
was not
Yeah, I
planned.
thought mom always
No.
wanted a girl, so they went for a third.
No, I was unplanned. Yeah. God's gifts.
Interesting.
Yeah.
God's plan.
Yeah.
God's gifts.
We're
Yeah.
God's. No, you're God's plan.
Yeah, you guys were mom and dad's
Mom
plan.
and dad's plan. Yeah, so to me, how I see it or how I interpret it now is that as an Asian American coming to the US, you're in a completely different social and cultural context. Nothing feels familiar. Nothing feels like home anymore. And you are thirsty for that sense of familiarity and that sense of home when you come here. That's like a natural human desire, right? And I think when mom and dad came here, they immediately gravitated towards the church because it was a community filled with other immigrants, Asian American immigrants from China. Same exact story. A lot of them came here for school, and they all had this desire for a sense of belonging. And the church provided that for them.
Yeah.
And on top of that, not only did they have a sense of community, they had a sense of higher purpose together as well through religion.
Yeah.
And that sort of human bond is one of the strongest bonds that you can find. I think this was especially important for mom coming to the U.S. because she really gave up everything, her career, her family, anything that she had to live for in China, she gave up to be here with dad. And we talked about this with the previous podcast. And I know for a fact that mom was severely lonely, severely depressed. And the opportunity that the church presented to her, I would say saved her life, for
No,
sure.
I would agree.
Yeah.
I think like on top of purpose and community and the human bond, it's like it also gives hope and like comfort, because even now, like, mom places, or even more so now, mom places a lot of like her source of comfort and reassurance from Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like that's how she tries to comfort us too. Like when we go to her for help, she'll always bring up like, oh,
Prayer.
talk to Jesus.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, that was the same thing for me too. I think growing up, whenever I was going through some sort of stressful period, and I think the way I grew up with religion was I used the sense of comfort of religion, used the comfort that religion provided as a way to cope with stress and anxiety. I don't know if you guys
When
did
in
this.
doubt, pray.
Exactly. When in doubt, pray. It was almost therapeutic. It was a
Right.
really good mental defense mechanism for me whenever I encountered a stressful situation.
Right.
So I remember like taking like the SAT or taking the ACT the night before. I would be stressed out of my mind because this was like one thing that would determine like a very big part of my life moving forward. Being super stressed, not being able to sleep, and the only thing that provided me a sense of comfort back then was to pray to God and be like, hey, this is in your hands now. This is not something that I can take care of. I've done the work to study. Not really. But I put in some effort, and at this point, there's nothing else I can do to change the outcome of what happens tomorrow.
Right.
Like, I'm going to leave this in your hands. And then once I knew that it wasn't in my hands anymore, I was much more at peace, and I was much more able
Right.
to tackle the task at hand.
When you're able to deflect, or maybe not deflect, but like assign like this higher being that has your best intentions, it's very easy to go through the world, just period. Anything that happens, you can, even if it's bad, if you truly believe that there's a higher being that is guiding your path towards the best possible outcome, that's such a mental ease and like weight lifted off your shoulder. So, and I think that is especially true with how mom and dad live their life now.
Yeah. Yeah, and they live, I mean, religion is really great. I think it brings people together. It offers people something to hold on to at their lowest moments. And I think even now, if I ever sometimes reach like rock bottom in my like depression or sadness, I will sometimes reach out to God and be like, hey, like if you're there, like just tell me and show me
Yeah.
that I
Whenever
have
get
something else.
super sick, I pray.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Oh yeah.
So
Deliver
Every
me from
time-
this pain.
Every time we
Sometimes
had
I
like
get
this
blackout
stomach.
drunk.
Oh my goodness.
And I feel like, God,
I'm
take
sorry.
me out of this
I'm so
misery.
sorry.
Bring me out of my sin
Oh
right
my
now.
goodness. No, but when we were children, like every time we had the stomach flu, like we'd be vomiting, mom and dad would come in and just pray with us.
Yeah.
And then magically, the pain would go away for like 2 hours.
There's definitely some sort of placebo or mental effect.
Yeah.
Spirituality. And I think for me, like I do want to connect with that spiritual aspect of religion again, whether it be through Christianity or some other religion. I think being a spiritual person and constantly wrestling with ideas of a higher power or something, a sense of something that's greater than you are, is an important aspect of being human
Right.
and community. So now, I know mom and dad are going to see this podcast, and
Oh boy.
I think this is honestly kind of important because I think it will open up conversations with mom and dad moving forward. And I'd like to have open conversations about religion with them, even though all three of us aren't really believers anymore. Sorry, mom and dad.
Wait a second.
What?
I will say.
What'd you say?
Not I.
Yeah, you can speak for yourself.
Oh yeah, Rachel.
I mean, I still think that agnostic for sure. I think there's
yeah, I'd say
a higher
more.
power.
I'm not discounting the fact that there isn't an intelligent designer
Right.
behind the whole universe that we live in, because
Right.
this shit's
There's no way.
crazy.
Yeah.
Like
Crazy.
like how
Hey, watch
the
the language.
like yeah, but like
yeah.
grass, wild,
Yeah. No, because when I was first
life, crazy.
gonna be baptized, like the biggest thing that I wrestled with was like, I had so much doubt, so much skepticism. Just I think I relate to Jesse in that, where I've always been skeptical of, are you sure, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
before I like made the decision to get baptized, as like a 12-year-old, I talked to dad, and he was like, okay, well, like look outside. Like, how is any of this possible? Like, there's no way all of this happened by chance, the way that, like, we have, like, even the concept of family, let alone life, let alone this earth. Like, what?
I think it's
Wild.
50-50. There is a probabilistic chance that this came out of nothing, just
The world is
because
infinite.
the universe is pretty much infinite,
Right.
and like there's a chance that the right molecules came together,
But I think
created conditions on Earth that allowed life to form.
My thought was always there needs to be a catalyst. So
Or something guiding the order of events,
Right.
maybe
Yeah.
even.
right.
But yeah, it's crazy to think about the fact that life exists. And it's even crazier to think that it happened all by random chance.
Right.
Yeah.
So I definitely think there's a very strong argument for there being a higher power, some supernatural being out there, but it's not necessarily the Christian God in my mind.
But what I think is really interesting, because we have talked to mom and dad about this in Canada. I remember having this conversation with them a couple years back.
Dad wasn't there. Neither
had
Dad nor I were there.
Okay. I was
Yeah.
talking to mom about this.
Okay.
So it's funny. Oh, maybe I brought this up to dad on a separate occasion, but they are so confident in their religion. I've openly talked to mom and dad about my doubts back in college, because my skepticism really kicked in high school, and then it really developed in college. But I've spoken to mom and dad about this, and they're so confident in the religion. They're like, yes, you should definitely wrestle with your faith. And they're confident that I will always come back to Christianity, which is fair. Like, in their mind, Christianity is the true religion.
Yeah, and if they believe,
Yeah.
if they do believe God exists, then they believe that God has good intentions to bring their family back in, right?
So they're
Yeah.
always very, very open with us wrestling with this and questioning our stance.
And I think
Yeah.
they know now, like they have to know, like, at sort of where we stand. At least you
Yeah.
and Andrew, I think they know less about where I stand in
Yeah.
terms of Christianity.
Yeah, college is a huge
Turning point.
turning
Yeah.
point or test of your faith, kind of. And it certainly was for me. So.
Yeah, but I don't know if they've said this explicitly to me or if I've kind of made this up in my mind, but I know when we were growing up, their whole parenting model was not to put too much pressure on us, because the more that they pressure us, the less we're going to want to do what they want
Very
us to
smart of
do,
them.
right?
Exactly.
And so I think they're taking the same approach to Christianity, where it's
Yep.
like, we're
You
not going
find
to
your own
pressure
way.
them to
Yeah.
do much, but
I-
they trust in God, and that you know the seed has already been planted.
Yeah,
Now
I don't
it's up
think
to him to
religion
finish that.
works if you're forcing it upon a group of people. Like, if you're forcing them to believe it or pushing it onto them, their belief is not genuine. So the only way for us to genuinely come back to religion is for us to do it on our own. And I think they understand that, and they believe that that will happen to us eventually. So now I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about what happened to each of us
What was the turning point?
where was the turning point for each of us, and why do you think we kind of lost this connection to religion and Christianity? I can start first, because I've thought about this a lot, and I know exactly kind of why this happened to me. So in college, I was still pretty religious. One of the first things I did coming to college was to join like a Christian fellowship, Hopkins Christian Fellowship. I still have a lot of friends from there. I made a lot of really great connections there. So freshman year, I found a really good group of friends within the Hopkins Christian Fellowship, and they were like a group of senior guys that were really intentional about mentoring me and some of my other friends within the fellowship. And that those seniors that mentored me gave me a really good sense of community and accountability when I was in college, because they're like, oh, like college is really fun, but it's really tough, full of temptations. We're here to guide and mentor you while you're going through college. And I was like, oh, all right, these guys are super cool. Like, I feel like I'm part of this community. And they made me feel like I belong somewhere, which is really good, because when you go to college, you're kind of on your own for the first time in your life, right? And I found my community in the Christian Fellowship. So they were seniors. So next year they left, right? And I was handed a lot of the responsibility of mentoring the next group of people. Let me check the time just to make sure. Okay. When they left, I was given a lot more responsibility, so I took on a bunch of leadership roles that these mentors were preparing me for. And life got infinitely more busy. I didn't have anyone else to mentor me. I was doing the mentoring. And this is something that a lot of people within the church talk about, is that it's not enough just to serve. You also need to be fed yourself. And I wasn't being fed spiritually or otherwise. And I was just giving a lot of myself without any of the mentorship or any of the feeding that I needed to sustain myself within this community. I talked to our the head of our fellowship my sophomore year, towards the end of the year, and I was like, I don't think I can take on all these responsibilities as a leader anymore. I feel drained. I'm gonna take a break and then reevaluate. And at that point, I was also being pressured by my roommates to disavow Christianity and go party with them. And I was like, dang, these like two pressures, and I was stressed out of my mind, like trying to balance leadership duties as well as trying to fend my beliefs from my roommates who were not only just like teasing me, but like actually like pressuring me to disavow my beliefs. And the confluence of all that kind of forced me to reevaluate what I truly valued about the church and what I truly value about Christianity. And a lot of the doubts start to creep back in about like, is God really actually a real thing? And then so I basically made a pact with God my sophomore year, and I was like, hey, I'm gonna test out this no religion life for a year, and if you want me back, you'll send me some sort of message that I should come back to you. And to this day,
Still waiting.
I'm still waiting on some sort of call from God to bring me back. And I've honestly put the onus on God to bring me back, if he's out there. And I'll be like, I'm just gonna live my life how I want to. And I've been able to find community outside of church now, and I've been able to satisfy that aspect of myself where I feel like I don't need to find that within the Christian community anymore. Yeah. I don't know if you guys had similar experiences, but that's kind of how I got to where I am today.
I guess, interesting thought. Nothing on my experience, but you know how in Christianity, like one of the debates, or I guess like ideas, is predestination. Like, what if you're just not predestined to go to heaven? So the call will never come. I'm just kidding.
So God's like, yeah, we don't need this kid in heaven with
Sorry
us.
about it.
Just a silly, goofy little thought.
Yeah, that's a possibility. I've also thought about that. Like, what if
Really?
I'm just not one of the chosen? But that's like a whole nother theological debate
Free
about
will exists.
what's the difference between free will and predestination. And like, because God is not bound by time, like he technically already knows where we're going to be, but he doesn't control the fact that we're going to be there. It's kind of a lot of mind-boggling thoughts when it comes to wrestling with the idea of religion, God, and sorry, I'm losing blood circulation. Omniscience, omnipotence, and omnipresence.
Trinity.
Yeah.
3 in 1.
Yeah, the three persons in one concept is kind of
Nutty.
also very confusing. I mean, people have been struggling with these ideas for ages.
Generations.
But yeah, Rachel, I'm interested to hear what your journey with religion and spirituality is like. Getting back to things, Rachel, what is your relationship or journey like with religion and spirituality, and how did you get to where you are today?
So I think it's actually pretty similar to yours.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, well, maybe not so much in college, maybe a little bit, I don't know. But yeah, so growing up, always had been a little bit skeptical. Like, I guess I just never found true fellowship in the church. Like, it always felt very forced to me. Like, I guess I never felt the comfort that people talk about when they're able to open up about like spiritual things. Like, I feel like it always felt kind of forced and not super genuine from my end whenever I would talk about. Are those recorders?
What the heck?
I don't know. Hopefully the mic doesn't pick it up.
But yeah, it always felt a little not super genuine,
Sure.
kind of forced when I was talking about like spiritual struggles, just because in the back of my mind I kind of knew that I didn't truly believe. Maybe like as a small child I did, but I think as soon as I hit middle school, it was kind of just like, is this real?
Yeah,
kind of thing.
for sure.
And then so in high school, you know, I still did all the church things, like led worship, taught Sunday
Yeah,
school.
and I
all
think
that.
those are all very valuable experiences that we had.
Yeah, I agree. I think like teaching experience was great. Like I love teaching now, and I'm grateful for that experience. And like leading worship, like being able to play music with other people is great. And I've always loved the worship aspect of church and religion. It's just a good time.
Yeah.
And I think that was probably one of the only moments where I actually felt some kind of spiritual thing happening. But it might also just be music, because I think I've experienced similar things in like orchestra settings or like chamber music. But yeah.
Yeah, music is a very powerful tool for connecting you with a sense of spirituality, I think.
Yeah.
And religion uses that to their advantage, or leverages that aspect of music very much.
Yeah, I also think it's just a great way to express feelings. So maybe not so much leveraging as much so as like expression.
Yes, definitely. But also, when you're not playing music and enjoying music, you can still feel a sense of connection to some sort of spirituality, I think.
Yeah.
I think
Like concerts.
yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Like concerts. Sometimes if you go to a Christian, like if you go to worship, it feels sometimes like like
a
the good
concert,
worship
yeah.
teams
Oh yeah.
lead
for
like
sure.
a concert. They don't really lead
Yeah.
worship. It feels like a concert or a performance of sorts. And it's really interesting because
Bethel.
I slowly started replacing every aspect of religion and Christianity with other
With another
secular things.
stuff. Yeah.
So I used to be a part of the worship team, and I really enjoy listening to worship music and performing worship music. Now I go to raves and EDM. But in college, I did start going to like EDM concerts and going to other hip hop and R&B concerts, and it gave me the same sort of experience as worship music. And I was like, oh, this feels the same. It makes me feel emotions. It makes me really happy. It makes me feel something that I remember feeling during worship.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I
Sorry,
feel like,
that was
no,
kind
no,
of a
you're good.
tangent.
I feel like there's like a specific difference between worship music and like secular music for me, but
Really, there is not. You know that if you take a Christian song, sometimes if you replace...
Is it a love song?
Yeah.
Or is
yeah,
it a Christian
yeah,
song?
that's what Vincent would talk
Yeah.
about. Sometimes,
Yeah, sometimes Christian songs, they don't even use the word God or Jesus in it.
Just use
They
him.
just talk about how much they love this person,
Lauren
how much...
Daigle, is that what her name is?
Who's Lauren Daigle?
I don't know.
There are a
Never
lot
mind.
of
There's,
there are a
like,
lot of
one-
Christian
yeah.
composers and
Yeah.
artists who write music so that it could be confused as a love song towards a romantic partner. Like, it's very hard to tell the difference, and that goes to show that you don't necessarily need to be
Yeah.
listening to Christian music to feel that sort of emotion or connection to spirituality.
That's fair. But I think like when you're partaking in worship, it's like with the intention that you're singing to a God, and like with
Right.
the heart of thankfulness or whatever, and like
Reverence, yeah.
yeah, that kind of thing. Anyways, back to
Yeah, your story.
yeah. So I think like mid high school is when it started falling off for me. Like the commitment was just not there 100%. I remember like sometimes when I had to lead worship, this was also the start of me overcommitting myself. So on Fridays I would just get home, I'd be so tired, I'd take like a 4-hour nap as soon as I got home. Sometimes I would just miss church entirely. And then also Science Olympiad, like whenever we had overnight competitions, like we'd always leave on Fridays after school, so then I wouldn't be able to go to church then either. So I just like slowly started going to church less, and like slowly my desire to go to church also decreased because a lot of my friends were 2 years older than me, and so like once they graduated, I was just like like there's not really anyone there. I had like 2 friends in the grade above mine, and then I wasn't super close with anyone in my grade. So the whole fellowship aspect just like completely fell off for me.
Yep. Same.
Yeah. And then so then after high school, and all of my friends at school, like my closest friends in school, none of them are Christian. And so that was another
that
big
makes
thing.
a big difference.
Yeah.
Who
and
you
I
surround
think,
yourself with makes a huge difference.
yeah. And I think like the message that had always been told to me, or like the idea was always that Christian people are so kind and caring, and like they try to model, like reflect God's love, and like reflect all these good morals and stuff. But like I loved my school friends. Like I thought they were the best kind of people. Like even though they weren't religious, they were like the most generous, the kindest people, the most caring people that I knew. And so I was just like, you can be a good person without being a Christian.
And on the flip side, you could be a self-proclaimed Christian and be a bad person.
Exactly. And like I've met people like that too. So I was just like, well, that means that I don't necessarily have to be a Christian to be a good person either. And so also like the whole idea of like, even though they're good people, like why would they go to hell if like their overall impact on the world is good? And so that was kind of the thing that made me really confused with like Christianity and like its validity. And also I think especially during COVID with like George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, and like our family is very socially conservative, or like mom and dad are, right? And so I started wrestling with a lot of those during that time, because I think throughout the first half of high school, I had been like, okay, I'm leaning more towards the socially conservative side. But then a lot of my friends were extremely left-leaning in terms of social, right? Like a lot of my friends were activists, and so I'd kind of like take a back seat, let them talk all about it, and I just stay silent. And eventually, like their ideas, like what they were saying, what they were fighting for in terms of human rights,
just makes sense.
I was just like, you're so right. Like people need to have rights. Like at the end of the day, it's rights. You know? And so I think that was probably one of the biggest factors in like pushing me away from church too. It's just
because the church as a whole holds some really confusing positions socially, and especially people within our church. I'm just like very confused. If you care about human beings like you profess you do, if you profess God's love like you say you do, how can you like see people struggle and see people being persecuted for being who they are and still reject them? And still reject and outcast them.
And it's always like love the person, hate the sin. But like identity is not a sin. I don't know. So that gets me a little fired up.
I can see both sides, just because I know mom and dad are good people, and I don't think they ever truly hate anyone. If every Christian were like mom and dad, I'd definitely be more inclined to, because they actually live what they preach. But seeing people that don't actually love intentionally and go out there and be a kind person like they are taught to do, that makes me not really doubt, but it does kind of push me away from wanting to be a part of that community. So your kind of journey away from religion was more from like a social activist kind of standpoint. You think that played the biggest role, or
the catalyst in me distancing myself, like just, or maybe less so distancing, but coming to the realization that maybe I had never been where I wanted myself to be, like because of mom and dad, because of like going to church. Like I had always wanted myself to be like true believer, like steadfast, whatever. Like everything that they preach that you should be. I came to the realization that I'm just not there, and I'm okay with that. So when I got to college is when things kind of flipped. And so then it was like I had like a rough 1.5 years, like first 1.5 years of college.
Yeah, because you started college during COVID.
Didn't have friends. And so this is where like church being a community played a huge part, because that was like the only thing that I could, like that felt familiar to me, because a lot of the people in the campus groups, like Christian groups, were also people that I had known from Mason. And so when I joined that, it just felt like same old, which also wasn't a great thing because I hadn't super enjoyed that in Mason anyways.
Yeah. But it was familiar. It was like, oh, people you knew. It's like basically when you go to a new city or a new place, you can always find friends at church.
Yeah, exactly.
They are very welcoming.
They're very welcoming, and that initial sense of community is great. But the test is like, true friendships are actually still kind of hard to find even within a church, I would say.
But yeah, so found community there. Like the friends that I had made were also all seniors, or the ones that I like talked to the most, and the ones that were mentoring me and like making sure that I was doing well in college. So after they graduated, I was like, ah ha ha ha. But I wasn't mentored to be in leadership roles, which was great for me.
Yeah, that's good. You didn't need something else to like occupy your time.
Internally combusted if that happened.
Oh, no, this is
I think
so
your
true.
relationship with religion would have been way more unhealthy if you added on top the stress of being a leader.
So I'd always kept like a bit of distance, even though like I went there for community. I think that was the only thing I was seeking at that point was community, and like I was doing all the religion stuff too, like reading the Bible, praying, doing the Bible devotions, whatever. But I was kind of in the mindset of I'll do these things, but it's not it's not going to have a huge effect on where I stand in my belief. Like I'll do it in the hopes that maybe I will get there, but I know
feel
that
some sort of conviction at some point.
But it just
never came,
and maybe that was because I didn't think it would, and I already had that mindset, but
I think you need to be in a receptive state in order for you to feel that conviction. Just like mom and dad, they were in a very vulnerable state when they first came to the U.S. That's why it had such a profound effect on them. Was because they needed something to cling on to. Like we talked about before, that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, social belonging is a very strong tier of that hierarchy. And when you go to a foreign country, it's really hard to find that. And the Chinese church provide that for them. So now, and I talked to Mark about this. Mark is a missionary who's our friend, who stays with us in Ohio a lot. Is like, how do you keep second generation Asian Americans connected to the church? Because a lot of our parents, they came and they didn't have that aspect of community and the ability to connect with their peers around them. But for the children of immigrant parents, they learn English as a native tongue. They're socialized in America, so they know how to belong within the community within America, not necessarily the church. So once you have that sense of community and belonging outside of the church, how can you get those second generation immigrant children to feel like they need to come back to church or feel the need for religion? Or maybe we don't even look at it that way. How do we get people even to come to church, not necessarily out of need, but out of a desire that's deeper than like a need for community? And that's something that church actively thinks about. Because once people have a sense of community elsewhere, the motivation to go to church then needs to be something else.
Right.
And what is that something else? And that's kind of what I'm struggling with. Like, what is going to eventually bring me back to religion or Christianity, if not the sense of community?
That's funny how your mind went, what is that deeper need? My mind went more surface level. Is at the end of the day, church needs to be more entertaining. I only say that because of Young Life that exists here in Ohio, right? I think a lot of
real.
Whether
religion.
It's real or not, it brings people in, right?
Right.
Yeah, you can debate
religion,
right. You can debate how real it is and how deep their faith goes.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, they do a much better job of bringing people in. And I don't think our church brings really any newcomers.
Yeah, because a lot of the church is still being led by our immigrant parents, and they don't have the vision for how to like maintain a community that's open and welcoming to our generation.
Right.
Right.
Because it's also culturally very,
We're very different.
Eastern and conservative.
right.
Whereas
Yep.
like we've been raised in the West.
We've been very much westernized, and our taste for community is very different from their taste in community and how they built and structured their community. Yeah. One thing I wanted to touch on was also my motivation for being involved in religion as a kid. Was a lot of my motivation for being religious was the fear of hell. I don't know if that was the case for you, but I was superstitious as a kid, and the driving motivation for me to be a good Christian boy was to avoid going to hell. And that's another thing about religion, is that religion often leverages fear in order for
Fear God, man.
leverages fear to gain or attract followers.
I would also add that, like, as a child with Awana too, like memorizing Bible verses and getting Awana dollars, like it was also a competition. It was like who can memorize
religion
the most
has
verses.
incentivized. It's kind of this is a part of religion I don't really like, is how religion takes advantage of people's vulnerabilities and fears in order to recruit more people. Like, we live in Ohio, one of the most conservative religious states, and if you're driving on I-71 ever, you'll see a sign that says hell is real, and that's one of the blatant tactics that Christians often use to scare people or fear-monger people into religion. And I remember as a kid, we would get these like little evangelism books, like, oh, like this is how you can evangelize to strangers or evangelize to your friends. And like one of the first steps is like ask your friend or ask a stranger, like, where will they go if they die today? Like, basically inducing fear of an existential afterlife crisis is how people are trying to bring people into this religion. And I feel like that fear tactic doesn't breed genuine commitment or genuine religious beliefs. Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I remember those booklets. This guy just burning. In
Do you want to be this guy in hell? No, you sure as hell don't. But yeah, Andrew, do you want to talk a little bit about your journey with religion and how you got to where you are today?
I can speed run through now. I think my path was very different, or my relationship with the Chinese church was very different from you and Rachel, because you guys didn't find like a very large friend group community within the church, but I did. Some of my closest friends who I'm hanging out with tomorrow are still from we've traveled like across the country / across the globe together. Yeah. So essentially, my class, for some reason, there were like 10, 15 of us within that grade that all became super close starting in pretty much first, second, third grade. So early grade school, like the 10, 15 of us got really, really close. And so I had a very, very deep connection with all my church friends from grade school all the way to senior year of high school. And so I wanted to go to church to see my friends. And church for me was pretty much the only place that I could see a large group of Asian Americans. So similar to mom and dad, where I wanted to see like a Chinese community or a Chinese friend group. Growing up in Ohio back when we grew up there or here, I didn't have that, especially in early grade school. It changed in high school, but early elementary school, if I wanted to see Asian kids, I had to go to church. And I loved going to church to see all my friends. And so that community became...
Good place to hang out.
Yeah, exactly. The place to hang out and my closest group of friends for pretty much my entire childhood. And so the turning point for me didn't happen until college, but the skepticism kicked in seen around like mid to late high school. I started really doubting things. I just, because I read the Bible, the entire Bible, and I did one of those Bible in a year programs. So I read through the entire Bible, and as I was just turning through these things, I'm just like, why do I feel like Christianity is just dodging bullets as we find more evidence as like science continues to progress.
Yeah.
And
It's
so
just like readapting and reinterpreting the Bible
It's
to
like-
fit these new
exactly
discoveries.
it's like, oh, the Bible didn't mean this literally, this was
Yeah.
just metaphorically.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, okay. But
Yeah.
growing up, we were taught that this was a literal interpretation.
Yeah.
So I just felt like the Bible was readapting itself as we
Yeah, when
discovered
carbon
more.
dating came out, people were like, oh,
Yeah.
there's no
Wait a
way the
minute.
Earth is this old. There's no way
Yeah.
that fossil is that old.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, then people are like, oh, the 7 days of creation were actually like 7 million days.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's just Genesis
just
was
the
supposed to
order.
be a story, not a scientific textbook, which
Yeah.
honestly
It's-
is
I
it's a
believe- I
good
can
yeah,
believe
right.
that,
I do think that is true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, no one like lived through Genesis. It was all
Exactly.
someone like.
So these
Later
are
writing it
stories
down,
Yeah,
yeah.
they
that
are
are
stories.
retold through
Yeah.
fireplace and whatnot.
Sorry, go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, where was I? So this was senior year of high school. I think where I differ from you guys is when I went to Georgetown, I never found a church community ever.
Yeah, mom and dad were not very happy with
Yeah.
that.
No, they were very concerned. They
Yeah.
called me every single week. They still call me every week and see if I found a church community. And I always tell them, which is really funny because Georgetown is a Jesuit institution.
Yeah. Who
which
has
is
now
very
turned
different.
to sin.
Well, I had a lot of Catholic friends. I didn't have a lot
Yeah.
of non-denominational Protestant
Protestant
friends, which is what we grew up in.
Yeah.
And so, similarly, the first couple weeks at Georgetown,
Mhm.
I did try to find a church. I went to church for probably the first couple months, just like hopping around, but I really didn't like any of the communities that I joined. And I was a lot closer with all my other friends outside of the
Secular,
church.
sinful
Exactly.
friends.
Okay, yeah.
Friends living in constant sin. I'm just kidding.
But I think the
That's how some Christians are, dude. They're
Yeah.
so
They-
judgmental.
Oh my god.
Some of them, yep.
Our parents.
No.
Sorry.
Whoa,
Go ahead.
whoa.
The biggest change was, it's really funny again, Georgetown students are mandated to take a class called Problem of God, and there's another theology class that you could take. But I decided to take Problem of God, and I loved that professor. But essentially, we did a literary study of like all the reasons, like just a study between why intelligent design does exist and why it doesn't. So every week we'd read from
great
either
class, wow.
Yeah.
exactly a new scholar for an argument for a god or without a god.
Yeah.
And essentially that is what probably led to my
You're more convinced by the arguments for there not being an intelligent design?
no. It was sometimes a Judeo-Christian god.
Yeah.
Right. So
Judeo-Christian
Judeo-
God.
Yes. And so that is where my agnosticism
Yeah.
became agnostic,
Yeah.
essentially,
Right.
because
Sure.
I was very convinced by the arguments for an intelligent design, but I was very unconvinced that it was
It had
the
to be the
Christian.
Christian
God.
Exactly.
Right,
I was
right.
very unconvinced that it was necessarily the Christian God. But I didn't like the nihilism or the like straight atheism belief that nothing matters or there's no intelligent design. It wasn't super convincing to me personally. And essentially after taking that class and after freshman year, I didn't seek out a church community really after that.
And you just kind of let it naturally
It naturally kind of
fall off.
dissolve.
Yeah.
But I will say every time I do go out to nature,
Yeah.
again, it's like, oh, there definitely is an intelligent design.
Right.
But
I just
is it?
don't-
Is it the Christian?
And I think
Judeo-Christian
that
God?
also, my friend group in Georgetown was very much a part of a lot of them were part of the LGBTQ community.
Yeah, and a lot of them have this disavowed Christianity.
Exactly. Or have been treated very poorly
By the
from
church,
the
yeah.
church.
Yeah.
And so that
Rightfully
led to
so, they
not
disavowed them.
a disdain for some of the social beliefs that our church stands upon. So
Yeah.
all those things kind of acclimated together to be where I am to this current day, where church, and the biggest debate I have in my mind right now is whether or not to raise my kids up in a church, because for me, I
You
think
see the benefits of it.
I had so many benefits. The
Right.
friend group that I have, the moral compass that I have, I think I do attribute a lot of my like personality to the morals that I learned
Yeah.
and picked up through the church,
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
which I think were really great.
Yeah.
And so,
But I think there is a healthier way of raising kids in the church, because I think with religion, I've not suffered, I don't want to make it a big deal, but I definitely had some sort of religious trauma after coming out from
there's
from
Christian
religion.
guilt.
There's
oh,
a
yeah,
lot of
there's
Christian-
so much religious guilt.
Yeah, especially when you're starting to, when you leave the bubble of Christianity, when we're leaving the bubble of Ohio and going to the coast and like meeting people there, and like being able to reconcile people who are good with good intentions but have what's considered sinful behaviors, like reconciling those two things are very difficult. And I definitely struggle with this cognitive dissonance a lot during college, when I still held my beliefs. I still was very involved in the Christian fellowship, but people were drinking, people were doing drugs, and I also drank with my friends occasionally, and actually a lot freshman year. And
Whoa, simple behavior.
and
when you were
and,
after you turned 21.
Yeah. And like
freshman year.
and like people called me out on that. Like I had people be like, hey, aren't you like in the Christian fellowship? Why are you like going out and partying with your friends, like and drinking? And I struggled so hard with that, and that was like, that created a lot of stress, because I was also a leader in the fellowship at one point, and I gave up drinking that entire year.
Dang.
And I
Great for your liver.
yeah, well, yeah, I guess, but like I was actually pretty miserable that year, because I didn't have the social outlet of coping with the stress of school anymore. So that was actually one of the most stressful years of my life. So yeah, I don't know if you guys have struggled with that cognitive dissonance of feeling the sense of shame when partaking in sinful behavior, while understanding that the activity is not intrinsically bad if you're not hurting someone else, you know?
Yeah. And it's also like the drinking age in the U.S. is different from the drinking age in other places.
It's
so like
so
it's
arbitrary.
Just arbitrary.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was thinking,
No,
back to
you couldn't even
Jesus' water
drink.
to wine.
Yeah, I know. Jesus supported alcoholism, maybe not alcoholism, but
He wanted
definitely.
people to have
The
a good
consumption
time.
of alcohol.
Then, I mean, yeah, drinking is definitely a cultural thing, but
Not to
not just
rationalize
drinking,
that.
but there's a bunch of other things that I don't want to get into detail.
Whoa.
Yeah, I don't know if we
Whoa,
want to talk
Jesse.
about that.
Just kidding. I think a lot of my shame, like I have faced the cognitive dissonance, but I also have realized a lot of it also comes from me wanting mom and dad's approval. So I know like some of the things, or like the people that I surround myself with too, and like especially I think the most religious guilt that I feel is the fact that I don't really consider myself to be a Christian anymore. And I know that stresses mom out a lot, because I remember one time I came home and mom was like, oh, just talk to Jesus about it. And I was like, Mom, I'm gonna be real with you. Me and Jesus are not tight right now. And the way
We no longer
I saw-
homies.
We not homies.
the way that like I saw mom's heartbreak in that moment, she went, really? And I went, I should not have said that. I should not.
Maybe, how do we hide this entire podcast from mom and dad?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Oh.
I don't know. I think for them, it's like they found so much comfort in Jesus, and like the whole idea of eternal life and like being with your family once you know, pass away on this earth.
Mom and dad are ready to hear this episode.
Yeah, but I think a lot of my guilt comes from there, and I know like especially with like when both of you have had significant others that have been non-Christian, like they
Yeah.
tried to convert them so hard.
Yeah. That was
More
also
so
a pretty
with
painful
you. That was
process.
pretty bad.
Yeah.
For me, at least. I don't know about you.
No, not at all for me.
Really?
Oh no, they didn't try at all.
Really? Yeah, that was.
Well, that
was.
shorter, too.
Yeah, that was
Maybe.
very aggressive in his tactics.
Yeah.
Trying to convince or trying to convert my ex to sin.
Yeah.
Once things started getting serious with you guys, I feel like that's when, or was
Yeah.
it right from the start?
It was when, well, do you remember? She was invited to a lot of our family devotions. And this is one
Oh,
thing I
yeah.
really actually
Yeah, I
appreciate
remember
about
this,
my
yeah.
ex, was that she
Wow,
actually,
she was a
she really
trooper.
wanted to, at one point she saw a future together with me, and then she participated in all of our
Wow,
family
she did.
devotions. Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness, I
Yeah.
forgot about this.
I,
oh my goodness.
she was honestly, I really am thankful that she put in that effort.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
But she did come visit during COVID, and she was always put off because she always knew that she wasn't going to become Christian, and that dissonance of like, oh, like how can I ever be enough for Jesse's parents if I don't become Christian? And like
I think that's like what I've kind of not the.
So was
how
it
I'll ever
unfair of
be
me
enough.
to put her in that situation? Because what, like, I don't think I'm going to be in a relationship with someone who's
Yeah, at one point, maybe not.
Christian,
I, at the time, hindsight 2020.
Yeah.
I think now, if you do start dating somebody serious who is a non-Christian, you really have to
like what
make
can I
mom
do?
and dad.
Like
It's tough.
I've even
They-
talked about with
I don't
my
even
ex
know.
about like pretending she's like a Christian, just to like
Hey, cut this out, mom and dad. Mom and dad.
where
Wait a minute,
like
wait a minute.
where like mom and dad would be able to fully accept them, but then it'd be based on a lie, and then like
Yeah, yeah.
is that
That's not
true
great either.
acceptance?
Yeah.
And the thing is, I'm not even Christian, so like,
I know.
what is the like? They were more inclined to convert her than they were to me, and they knew that I wasn't Christian. Maybe they knew that because I was their son. That,
You'd come back.
There's
Yeah,
more
they-
trust there.
but
yeah.
the other thing is in the Bible, I think marrying someone who's not Christian
That's
will
also-
carry you even further away
Yeah.
from Christianity, because I think that's what they did
Right.
want.
Wasn't that the message when you brought your ex to church that one time?
Probably.
I remember
Yeah.
that
Oh,
was so
God.
funny.
Um,
And Dad was giving the message.
yeah.
Oh
It was a subtle jab.
The
Yeah.
subtle-
It wasn't a subtle
Oh,
jab.
man.
Oh, dude,
That's
Dad
so
is
funny.
actually super passive aggressive about these things.
Yeah.
He is.
And it's really annoying and detrimental to our relationships. Fix
So it
that,
looks
Dad.
like we can only date good Christian. It's tough because that really is. I always say mom and dad are actually. I love them in the sense where whoever our significant other is, one of the top priorities is if they make us happy, then they will love them.
Yeah,
But the top priority that rivals that priority is if they are Christian.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It is on very equal playing fields.
Yeah,
those
and
two.
for us, it's like at this point, it's almost one or the other.
Yeah,
Like
pretty
it's
much.
we can't satisfy both conditions at this point. Or at least for me right now, I don't.
Maybe.
Unless there's someone that has basically the same relationship with religion as I do.
Yes.
Or like they've actually been raised in a church and they know what it's like to be a Christian, and they know that like how to behave within those settings almost. Because it's almost like the
Yeah.
church is like
Yeah.
it's like its own society and culture where you
Yeah.
have to know how to operate in a
Right.
certain
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
And I think we can get away with that.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't want that to be like a criteria
Right.
of me being able to date someone,
Yeah.
you know?
Because the only thing that prevents me from dating somebody who's a devout Christian is I know how my mind worked as a devout Christian thinking about dating.
Mm.
And in my mind back then, I wouldn't date somebody like me if I had the faith I had.
So it's less
so
of you
it's
being able to
exactly
find someone and the
it's
other person
them-
accepting
Yeah.
you.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
those kind of people wouldn't want to date us at
Exactly.
this point.
Yeah,
so,
pretty
like,
much.
so like, how are we gonna bridge this gap? And maybe we just have to
but I think that-
settle with mom and dad not being happy with. They'll be happy in the sense that we found someone we are happy
love,
with
Yes.
and who we love, but I don't. There will always be
Right.
this like this
Right.
dissatisfaction with our partner, which is such an unfair burden to put on our partner.
No facts.
And I don't know, like at this point, like I feel a little guilty like bringing someone into that sort of dynamic.
Oh, we had to figure this one out, huh?
Yeah, and I honestly
Added
don't
to
know.
the to-do list. Post-it note this.
Yeah, generally speaking, mom and dad are very easy to please, but when it comes to relationships, it has always been very difficult for me. Like even starting in high school, like
Oh yeah.
mom and dad were
Oh, yeah.
never pleased with any of the relationships I was in.
That's why I just
Yeah.
didn't get into any.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah,
You and me both, homie.
Yep.
good on
real
you
for
guys.
real.
But eventually, both of you will have to.
We have.
And,
Well,
I have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Eventually,
I
Rachel
could
will have
be-
to, and
I could be alone forever. I'm
Really?
Honestly,
satisfied by myself. Yeah.
Maybe that's what we
Yeah.
just gotta do.
No, I can't.
Riding solo for the rest of my life.
We'll just have
I
our
need
own
someone to
village.
love.
Yeah.
We'll adopt all these children.
Oh, true.
Yeah.
Anyways,
have fun.
I don't think we're gonna solve that during this podcast, but I did really want to talk about this.
Wow.
We can talk about more in
Yeah.
future
So-
podcasts, but I think I'm gonna cap it off here. So I don't have to edit as much footage. Let me see if there's any points that I missed. Why we outgrew religion. Could you see yourself going back? Coping mechanism. Do you think you could see yourself going back? I kind of answered that.
Oh, that's true. We talked
Religion.
about this.
Yeah. Yes,
Potentially.
no. I think
Yeah.
the only thing that would bring me back at this point is raising my kids in the church.
Yeah.
Because
You'd
it's
have to
free
be a
daycare. No, I'm just kidding.
Progressive leaning okay.
No, I think there are a lot of churches nowadays too that have adopted more
Yeah, exactly.
socially.
Yes, beliefs.
Yeah.
I would.
That's-
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a lot of friends who are from the fellowship that left the fellowship because they were either anti-LGBTQ or held some sort of belief that like just truly conflicted with what they value. I think those people have now formed their own group of people or
Yeah.
their own churches and their own communities, and I think as culture grows and evolves, religion has to evolve with it
Yeah.
in order to adapt to the culture and society
Christians are
that
gonna like that one.
I probably
Yeah.
not,
But, it's,
but
again,
it
it's
has
like
already
the
evolved.
interpretation.
Yeah,
like,
it's like
there's been so
the
much,
bel-
especially with science and
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
Like it has to.
Yeah.
That
it'll
was
at
my
some point
qualm
like,
with
social-
religion.
Yeah, it's also like, is it truly religion if it's evolving and adapting? I think yes. I
is,
think it
yes.
is, because like when Jesus was alive on this earth, religion or Judaism and
Huh.
Christianity was very different, and
That's
even in the
interesting.
Old Testament,
Yeah.
like
Interesting.
obviously
And it's
everything
like-
has adapted to
Yeah.
the culture.
Aside from religion too, it's like the Constitution. Like humans weren't considered. Like
Yeah.
humans excluded people of
Yeah.
color, women. It was
Yeah,
only
exactly.
white males.
It does have to. I
But
mean, I
the-
stand with you
so-
guys on this one.
Yeah, I hope it does adapt, because I think a lot of conservative Christians still hold the belief that certain groups of people are
They have
higher
not
than
adapted.
others.
Exactly.
Yeah, they have to adapt, because like
Yeah.
clearly every human deserves and has the same rights.
Right. Right.
Anyways, thank you guys all for joining this episode of the Rooftop Pod. I hope you guys enjoyed this content, and maybe some of you guys relate to some of the experiences that we have. If you do, tell us about your experiences. We'd love to hear about them. And with that, I'm signing off. I'm your host, Jesse, and signing off with me is my sister
Rachel.
and my brother.
Andrew.
And tune in next time to the next episode of the Rooftop Pod. Peace.
Peace.